Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Gaming Mix podcast, your official podcast from analogstickgaming.com. If you don't know me by now, my name is Jordan, one of the co-owners of Analog Stick Gaming, and to my right, as he now often is the founder of Analog Stick Gaming, Jeff. How are you, Jeff?
I'm doing pretty decent. I get up
Yeah.
too long ago, so I'm a little tired.
you may see Jeff yawning and things like that, but it's early for him because that's just time zones are a thing, and he's in Canada and I'm in the UK. This is how we have to do it, unfortunately. However, as you can see from the title of the episode and also our fancy overlay today that Jeff made, we have both played the Plucky Squire and we've both reviewed it. And actually, we have a small announcement to make. If you don't follow Analog Stick Gaming on Twitter or any of ourselves, we are now on OpenCritic, right, Jeff?
Yep. We snuck in there.
So we are officially on OpenCritic. We have our 21 most recent reviews on there right now, so please go and check those out. And of course, Jeff reviewed Plucky Squire for us on Analog Stick Gaming, but I also was fortunate enough that I reviewed it for the Outer Haven, so we do actually have two reviews that I'll link below, and you can go and read those in full, but we will talk about our experiences with the game in more depth later in the episode, because we have spoken to each other a little bit about the game, but certainly not in detail. So it's going to be a good discussion today. But before that, I believe we have some news, as always, don't we, Jeff?
Yeah, there's nothing groundbreaking. Today it's been kind of a light week. I know everybody's kind of covering the Switch 2 leak or
which I assume means we might have a shorter episode today, given that we have less news than usual. So just bear in mind with that there. But maybe if we have time at the end, we might be able to talk about some other things we've been playing recently. So stick around for that.
Yeah. All right. So in typical Sony fashion, Horizon Zero Dawn Remastered has apparently been rated by the ESRB. The game, which VGC reported on in 2022, will come to both PC and PlayStation 5, according to the ESRB listing. A PC version of Horizon Zero Dawn was released in 2020 with improved draw distance and higher frame rates, but it mostly reused the assets, features from the PS4 version. It's believed that this version of the game will update the character models from the original PS4 release and bring them more in line with the PS5 version of Horizon Forbidden West. I'm not surprised at this. I mean, both me and Jason Schreier both made a Astrobot remastered joke. This is again, I mean, look at who's running Sony right now. We've got a Horizon remaster coming out. We've got a Horizon multiplayer game coming out. And then we've got a Horizon Lego game coming out.
Yes. Yeah, that is true. And don't get me wrong, I do like Horizon as a franchise. I don't love it as much as some people do.
Yeah.
But what I would say is that I think this really isn't needed, certainly at the moment. If this was happening in sort of 2 or 3 years from now for the PlayStation 6, then I could understand it more. But as a game that isn't even 10 years old, I'm not sure this needs to happen.
No, and I mean, you can get people bringing up the sales figures for Forbidden West, but the problem is that game bundled with the PS5.
Yes.
So the scale, the numbers for those are scaled to hell and back.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's like any game that's bundled, isn't it? It's always going to see some advantage.
It's why you can't take Wii sales numbers as a as a thing, because that's the only way that you could buy it was bundled in with the Wii.
Yeah, that's true.
Yet they're like, this game sold 155 million. And I'm like, no, it didn't.
No, it didn't. It's the same
tires are like the best-selling thing on a car because there's 4 of them.
By that logic, Jeff, Astro's Playroom is the best-selling PlayStation 5 game by a long way because it's sold with every PlayStation 5.
Yeah, so because I've seen people like saying like, "Oh, Horizon Forbidden West, so blah blah blah, I'm gonna copies. I mean, like it's super popular."
Yeah.
Well, no, go to
What I will say,
Games GameStop, and there's going to be like a billion used copies. But actually, no, they can't. It's a digital code.
what I will say regarding this Horizon remaster, Horizon Zero Dawn, is that I think it could be, well, one, because the ESRB are the ones that have rated it and not, because sometimes we see these ratings happen in much smaller countries, in much smaller territories, and then nothing really comes of it for a really long time, right? But because this is the ESRB doing this rating, I feel like this is probably coming fairly soon. And I wouldn't be surprised if this is something that they try and position alongside the PS5 Pro, um, which would be a weird thing to do. It just wouldn't shock me with Sony, and I am intrigued to see for the game as a whole. I'm intrigued to see how much they try and charge for it because I think it's a really weird one, to be honest.
Yeah, they'll charge $70. They'll do it.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. Alrighty. Um, Again, like news, so we're going to be covering some kind of basic stuff here. Nintendo has added 4 new classic NES games to its Nintendo Switch Online subscription service. NES, SNES, Game Boy, and Game Boy Color games are available as part of the standard Switch Online subscription. Sega Mega Drive, Genesis, N64, and Game Boy Advance games are also available to players who have subscribed to the service's more expensive expansion pack tier. So the games that have been added today, you're looking at Battletoads Double Dragon, Big Run, Cosmo Gang The Puzzle, and Kunio Kun no Dodgeball the Yozen. I don't even know what those words are. There's a dodgeball game. Um, Battletoads Double Dragon was always an interesting one because like those were games that almost kind of played similar. Like they kind of followed that same kind of like side scrolling kind of beat 'em up thing, and it's kind of a weird combination, but it works. I mean, it wouldn't work now
Yeah,
because
of
each
course.
of those games have gone in completely different things. But Double Dragon has been kind of coming back with that pixelated game that was super fun.
Yes, yeah, yeah,
I
definitely.
think,
I mean, we're always going to see them adding these things, right? And I would love to know how many people are actually playing them, though, because there is some work to be done on the technical side for them to do these things,
yeah,
and I just wonder whether it's actually worth them doing. And that's not me saying that they shouldn't do it. I just wonder whether they're actually seeing any value in it from a business perspective.
I think with certain games they probably are. I don't think this week is like an offering that is going to like move the needle at all. But when you start getting like where they're adding like the Mario parties and all that kind of stuff, like the games that people are legit wanting. Um,
Yes, yeah.
so it also comes down to a lot of licensed things because like Nintendo released a what was it, Road to El Dorado game that they published or something like that on the Surface, and that one hit like last year. So
That's
there's a
funny.
lot of interesting ones there. Respawn is developing the final chapter of the Star Wars Jedi story. Laura Meal, president of EA Entertainment and Technology, mentioned the project during a presentation at the company's investor relations day on Tuesday. We have delivered some of the highest quality and best selling Star Wars games of all time, with over $5 billion in net bookings. This impressive track record includes, of course, the Star Wars Jedi games, where over 40 million Star Wars fans have connected with Cal Kestis and his arc of becoming a powerful Jedi. Respawn is working hard to bring the final chapter of this thrilling story to players. So this is also on top of the fact that they are bringing um, Jedi Survivor to PS4 and Xbox One. Those trailers are up. The gameplay is rough. Like it definitely is like a lower tier version of that game. Um, but I mean, it's going to hit a massive audiences, probably not even upgraded yet. Um,
Yeah, that's true. I mean, we saw we saw with the PlayStation 4 and 5 numbers, right, that there's a lot of people that still haven't upgraded yet. So, yeah, you know, the reason these games are getting back ported to the previous gen is because, unlike in the past, there are still a lot of people on the previous gen consoles at the halfway point of this generation, right? So this stuff's gonna keep happening until more people upgrade. The problem
Yeah.
that this generation in general has had is that it came out during a time when the world decided to sort of fall apart for a little while there. And not only that, but that ultimately caused a lot of economic problems, which means that many people who traditionally probably would have upgraded by now are just not able to financially.
Yeah.
Um, but I'm interested to see from like a wider perspective what is there anything at all that can entice those people to upgrade? And I know that a lot of the conversation has been around, oh, GTA 6 will be the point where like that's where you'll see a lot of people starting to upgrade because that is a game that people will want to play and they will buy a console for. I just don't know with the price of these consoles and with the fact that the price of these consoles hasn't really changed, certainly on the Sony side. Like, they're actually more expensive to buy now than they were when they first released. And so are the controllers, as we mentioned last week. I know that Xbox has lowered their prices slightly, but then they put them back up again as well. It's kind of there's just this weird economic thing. So I think that unfortunately ports like this will carry on happening, but they play into part of the problem because the longer that these games are being backported, the longer that people will feel like they don't need to upgrade.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of people that are still playing like the free to play games that are on PS4 and on Xbox One. Like
Yeah,
they just haven't found a
absolutely.
need for it. And even if they do upgrade, they're still playing the Fortnites and the Rainbow Sieges
And
and
I think
Grand
that's
Theft
made a
Autos.
big difference as well, right? Compared to previous generations, is the rise of the free to play game and the rise of the ongoing live service type game has meant that lots of people nowadays, not necessarily of our age group or a slight bit younger than us, but lots of teenagers especially and gamers in their early 20s are mostly playing live service games now or some sort of ongoing game.
Yeah.
And I think that it means they have less of a reason to upgrade, right? And I think that for that group of people, as we've mentioned in the past, streaming has also meant that a lot of young people now want to upgrade to gaming PCs instead of consoles. So while I don't think consoles are dying because there will always be a dedicated audience for it, I do wonder if we've reached the point, and this is a wider conversation to have on another episode, but I wonder if we've reached the point where generations basically won't exist anymore and consoles will just become like mobile phones where you don't necessarily have to upgrade, but there are some bonuses for doing so.
Yeah, I think they'll still do generations and stuff like that, but I just think it'll be a little bit different. Like, because you take a look at like Xbox, for example, like when the next Xbox comes out, you're probably just going to be able to stream that kind of stuff on TVs and even like the existing consoles. So
That's
they'll still,
true actually. Maybe they'll use
you know,
streaming to bridge the gap, right? That's something I hadn't thought about because they already do that with Xbox One, don't they? Where
yeah,
you
because
can
like
stream certain series games on Xbox One.
because if streaming can get to a point where it can reach everyone, and be flawless. Like if Microsoft could achieve that
Yeah.
100%,
Mhm.
you could release a console that is literally like an eighth of the price of the next PlayStation.
Which is basically a streaming box, right?
Yeah, you
Yeah,
know,
it's gonna
and
be gonna be interesting to see. But as for this Jedi Survivor situation specifically,
yeah,
I'm surprised this last generation version exists
yeah.
purely because the game doesn't run well on current generation hardware and still has problems on higher end PCs as well. So I hate to think
I
the
know most
amount
of
of
that stuff is fixed
cutbacks.
though.
Yeah, I mean, most of it is, and they have definitely improved the experience. But I guess the point I'm trying to make is they had to make cutbacks and adjust things to make it run well on current hardware from what their original intent was with the game. So I hate to think, and I haven't seen the gameplay of these last generation versions, but I hate to think what sort of cutbacks they've had to do to even get that running on those machines, to be honest.
Yeah, like it definitely looks like a little rough. But no, it should
I'm sure
it's
we'll
probably
see a
still playable.
Digital Foundry video on it, so
Oh
I'll
yeah.
be waiting for that one with eager interest. What other news do we have here today, Jeff?
All right. So speaking of another game kind of coming back here, we've got Darksiders 2 Definitive Edition is getting a kind of remaster. So featuring 4K visuals, ray tracing, enhanced lighting and shadows, improved loading times, and haptic feedback on the PS5. The upgraded title will hit current gen consoles this October 15th. So it's going to be priced at about $30 US, but people who have pre-ordered the game on PS5 will get a 50% discount, while customers who already own the title for PS4 will receive a free upgrade to the current gen version. So there's also a 50% discount going on for Xbox One until October 14th, and owners of this version will automatically unlock the new features of the Xbox Series X version upon release via smart delivery. So there have been three main games in the series so far. We've had Darksiders 2, and Darksiders 3. We've also had Darksiders Genesis, which I think is probably one of the best ones. But Darksiders 2, I honestly cannot remember if I've beaten it. Like, it was so long ago.
Yeah, I mean, when did that game originally come out? It was a long time ago, right?
Let's see. 2012.
Wow. So we're talking about 12 years ago. That is basically a generation and a half.
Yeah, I think it came out the same year was when I had my first PAX, because I remember buying the strategy guide at a Walmart down there.
Nice, nice. But yeah, I mean, I never actually played Darksiders 2, so I can't really comment on this one. But I do like to see games like this come back because they're the kind of game that I feel like often didn't get enough love the first time around. There are some games like that where they're good games, but for whatever reason, they just don't get the attention they deserve upon their initial release. And I think that sometimes these remasters or remakes that are done of these kinds of games can help bring them to a new audience. You know, for example, we've got the Dead Rising deluxe remaster that's coming out tomorrow, I believe, at time of recording. And I can imagine an entire new audience of people playing that game. Like it came out 15 years ago or something. You know, it's I think or actually no more than that. 18 years ago, Dead Rising came out, and I just think that there is an entire new generation of gamers. So I've personally got no problem with these kinds of games coming back. I just think that, you know, people like to see more than just a visual update at this point because we've seen what remakes and things like that can do.
Yeah.
So it's going to be interesting to see how they handle this Darksiders 2 kind of redoing of it.
But it's probably a good return on investment for I believe it'd be THQ and therefore Embracer, just
Yes.
kind of like re-releasing something. And the fact that last gen for owners get this for free, that's
Yeah.
interesting.
That's really
Um,
good. That's really good. I think they did well with that decision there.
yeah, no, I'm super pumped to go through it again because we've got also uh, the Mickey remaster coming out as well too, which has been kind of equally as long. Um,
Yes. That
so
one
that's
was 14 years ago.
yeah,
And I believe that was only on Nintendo Wii as well, if I'm not mistaken.
I can't remember.
So that's going to be an interesting one to see what happens with that. But yeah, I like remasters. I'm a big fan of remasters, other than when the game is not even 10 years old yet.
Oh dear Lord, I know. I don't understand. I really do not understand
It's money,
um,
Jeff. It's free
what's
money.
Sony's
That's
doing.
what it is.
Oh dear Lord. All right, so we've got Capcom has released an update for Dragon's Dogma 2, which adds a casual mode, more animations, and dozens of gameplay tweaks and bug fixes. So we're going to be adding a whole bunch of stuff. So the game's new casual mode makes several changes to Dragon Dogma's difficulty. This includes reduced in fees for staying at an inn, reduced price of the fairy stones, more difficult for weight carried to become heavy or very heavy, less stamina extended when dashing outside of battle. Loss gauge will not increase when selecting load from last save after the Arisen dies. And pawns will recover from Dragon's Plague without a devastating calamity occurring, even if the symptoms progress to a terminal stage. Capcom noted that while players can change the difficulty to the casual mode mid playthrough, it's not possible to change it back. Some trophies and achievements will also be blocked by this mode. Um, yeah, so like Dragon's Dogma is a game that I think will benefit from this greatly because I know a lot of people that have heard about how like kind of not necessarily that the game is difficult, but that it doesn't really kind of hold your hand in a lot of ways. And I think that these types of things do kind of fix some aspects of that, especially the Dragon's Plague, because like that became a nightmare because like your game was just pretty much done if your pawn exploded. But it'll be interesting to see if this kind of pulls in new players because I mean that's definitely what they're shooting for.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, game
Yeah,
good.
for sure. For sure. I apologize if you saw me on my phone just there. I was making a review request, and that's all I can say.
Mm.
So yes. But yeah, I'm kind of with you on that. Is you know, it's gonna be interesting to see what happens with that one.
All righty. So this one's interesting. The European physical release of Marvel vs. Capcom Fighting Collection Arcade Classics on Switch will be a code in a box, and Capcom has confirmed this to VGC. A tweet posted on the official Capcom Europe account on Twitter last week stated that the Switch version is a code in the box, whereas the PS4 version will have a disc. Out now for digital and Nintendo Switch, PS4, and Steam. The Switch code in a box in PS4 disc in a box physical on November 22nd. Check your local stores for details. Offers may vary. This message led some to assume that Europe would be the only region getting a code in the box because there had been no suggestion that this was the case in North America or Japan. VGC reached out to Capcom for clarification, and they now have official confirmation on the situation. The publisher has officially confirmed to VGC that the Europe, Middle East, and African physical editions of the game on Switch will be a code in the box, whereas the North American and Japanese releases will contain a cartridge. The news will be a disappointment to players in Europe who'd like to own physical copies of their game, with the knowledge that at some point in the distant future, the Switch eShop will eventually close down, like the Wii, 3DS, Wii U, and digital stores before it. The region free nature of the Switch does mean that players in Europe will be able to import the North American or Japanese release and play it on their systems with no issues, though doing so will certainly cost more than buying a copy locally. This is weird. Like, is this just like manufacturing costs are like more expensive there?
I'm not sure. I know that obviously shipping costs can be weird because shipping often goes by weight of products as well.
Yeah, but it can be
But
like the Switch cartridges barely weigh anything.
precisely, yeah, precisely. So this is a strange situation. I really don't know. Um, unless they don't. The only thing I could think is that if they're not manufacturing in that region, they probably would have to pay different import taxes and stuff because obviously it's manufactured somewhere else. Whereas having it be a digital only code in the box, it might be easier to manufacture just a box, if that makes sense,
Yeah.
in the region. Which would, and because it would be manufactured already in the region, they would avoid a lot of additional taxes and stuff, which would save them
Yeah,
money.
it's just sort of weird because like they're making a ton of money right now by double dipping by having the digital version now and then the
Yes.
physical version later. But if the physical version for Switch is just going to be a digital one, then
Yeah, so it's basically pointless, right? They might as well not do it. Like,
yeah, it's just to basically have a case.
yeah. Um, but I kind of think maybe that's the way the industry is going as well. As we've got a bit of time here because we don't have the biggest news in the world, this might be an interesting conversation to have. But I saw a tweet the other day and I can't remember who exactly tweeted it out, so I do apologize for that. But it was someone like a Tom Warren or actually it might have been Destin from IGN. And they said something like anyone who thinks that the next generation consoles are going to have disk drives are crazy because by then they're just not going to. And unfortunately, I think that's the reality. Look, I'm all in on digital at this point. I haven't bought a physical game for a really long time. Um, and I do think that we've reached the point where the percentage of digital sales is so high that it no longer makes sense for these companies to do physical copies because the cost of making them is more than the amount of people buying them, I would imagine, in most cases. Um, I think I saw a stat that something like 80% of all of EA's sales now worldwide are digital, and Capcom, I believe, is as high as 90%. So when you've got publishers that are selling the vast majority of their copies of all games on digital, I think that physical is ending. I'll be really honest. I think you'll get a few companies that still do physical versions of things like limited run games and stuff. But we know how long those take, right? Like you order something from limited run and it takes 10 years to arrive. It's
Yeah.
yeah, it's interesting. It's really, really interesting. But I do wonder whether from the Nintendo perspective, because they're always a little bit behind the rest of the industry with this kind of stuff. So I wonder whether this is just the first sign of them sort of being like, yeah, we're going to start moving more into the digital now as we get to our next generation. I don't know. I could be wrong, but I remember this happening with Xbox games about 5 or 6 years ago. There was a point where certain games would release with just a code in the box. So you no longer got a digital version. And of course, before that, there were games where the disc was essentially just a boot key and there was no actual information on the disc. So I think that we've been heading towards this digital future for at least 12 years at this point, if not longer. And physical has slowly become less and less meaningful to the gaming industry. And I don't, you know, I compare it to movies, because with movies, they do still make some number of physical sales, right? But there's a reason that we don't see every movie released on the 4K format, for example, because most people who buy physical movies still only buy Blu-rays. That's all they want to buy, right?
Mm-hmm.
But even then, if you look at Blu-ray sales now compared to Blu-ray sales 10, 12, 15 years ago, is a no contest, because most people don't buy movies anymore. But the amount of people that buy movies on physical still is higher than the amount of people that buy games on physical, even though games started going digital after movies did. So, you know, it's interesting to think about, but I think that unfortunately, and I know that you're somewhat of a physical collector, right, Jeff? So maybe you have a different perspective on this.
It depends. Like usually if like I'll usually buy like some of the PS5 stuff on digital, because I can usually get good trades to get towards it, because you really can't generate codes at GameStop for PlayStation games, whereas Xbox you can. And like I game share with my roommate on Xbox. So like when
Yes.
I have Warhammer Space Marine, she's got Warhammer Space Marine as
So you
well.
actually save money that way, right? Because
Yeah,
you
like
game.
I've seen tons of people going like, I can't wait for like family plans coming, so I don't have to keep buying 2 games on Xbox. And like, you do know you never had to, right?
Yeah, you can share with one person. Like,
Yeah. And like I explain that, and they're like, oh well, shit,
yeah,
you
yeah,
know.
I know. Yeah, no, definitely, I agree with you, and I actually do the same on PlayStation. So me and my partner share on PlayStation
See, we
because I.
couldn't we couldn't get that working. Like we both had to buy Final Fantasy VII Remake.
Oh, really?
We could not get game share working.
Oh,
I may end
wow.
up reaching out to you in terms of getting like the exact steps and stuff like that. Because like yeah, we both had to buy Final
Because yeah,
Fantasy
no,
VII
on
Remake.
PlayStation, at least here in the UK, it definitely does work. But I would imagine it works anywhere. So
Yeah.
we'll sort that out offline. But yeah, I just think that we really are heading towards an all digital future, and people need to sort of prepare themselves for that. Unfortunately, you know, I don't want to sound like too negative towards anyone that still likes their physical, but what are the chances, Jeff? What do you think the chances are that the next gen consoles ship with disk drives as standard? I'm not talking about them being offered as potentially an optional thing, because I do think that will probably still happen next generation. And I think the gen after that will be when they're completely gone. But what do you think the chances are that they ship as standard with a disk
Like a
drive?
built-in, I don't
Yeah,
see it.
you don't see
You
it?
know, no, because like you take a look at places like, like Walmart, and they'll have like 32 games for Xbox and maybe about 68 games for PlayStation, and then a dump bin filled with whatever, and that's generally all they have.
Yeah.
And you gotta think that the majority of people that are buying physical games are buying them at places like Walmart,
Hmm.
because it's just like they don't have to make a special trip just to a video game store. They can go and
Yeah.
get their groceries and clothes and prescriptions, and then go
Yeah.
to the gaming thing. Go like, oh hey,
And
check it out,
also
Survivor PS4.
at those kinds of stores as well, at least here in the UK, we often find that games, if you are buying physical games at those kind of mart stores, um, they are sort of 10% cheaper a lot of the time, because they will use games almost as like a loss leading tactic, where they know that you're going there to buy the game because it's slightly cheaper than the actual gaming stores. But they know that while you're in there, you'll buy other stuff as well, because they sell so many different things.
Yeah.
Um, So but another interesting thing as a point as to why we're heading towards digital is I was looking on our local kind of main gaming chain here in the UK, which is called Game, funnily enough. It's
How
just called
original.
Game. Yeah. Um, and
You have a
they
car
don't.
dealership called Cars.
And Game is a national thing over here. They are the biggest sort of gaming chain. There are a few other ones, and there have been some in the past, but some of them they actually swallowed up. There used to be another company called Game Station, who was their
Okay.
competitor, and they actually swallowed them up. Um, but yeah, Game no longer, at least in my area, all of the game stores no longer accept trade-ins of any physical items,
Hmm.
including consoles.
Wow.
So
Yeah, ours here, like they had a trade the other day. Like this is how I got Astro. Like I literally traded because like I don't play Super Mario Brothers Wonder anymore. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna trade in that, and then I was gonna trade in Last of Us Part Two, but I guess I'd already traded it in. I traded in Ghost of Tsushima because like again, I'm not gonna play it again.
once you played that game, you never need to play it
Like
again,
I'm
right?
not gonna play those games again. So I traded like both of those just straight across for Astro because they had a deal where essentially you got 50% more trade
Wow.
as you trade it. So instead of getting like what was it like 35 or whatever for like Super Mario Wonder or whatever, I got an additional 17. So like those types of trade-ins make it very enticing to basically go in and get new
Yeah.
games. And like I paid 50 cents for Astro.
Yeah. Yeah. And
So
I
like
think that
those deals are great.
I think that this is the one thing that digital needs to try and find some sort of way to tackle as we go forward is a way of offering more value to the customer at
Well,
least certain times. I think Steam does a good job for the amount of sales and stuff that they have. And
there
I think that
was
go on.
there was talk years ago, and I think it was centered around Xbox, where they were going to do some type of digital trade-in, where it would
Yes.
just remove the license from your platform, and then
Yeah.
basically like you put that towards
Yeah, I
new
think there
releases.
was. So I think that is something they were considering in years prior. I know that another thing they were considering in the past, but they didn't message it right to people. And this was actually around the time that the Xbox One generation started. Is they were going to do this thing with digital games where you could actually send your license to a friend when you were finished with it.
Yeah.
Um, so I do think there will be some interesting things that happen. The other thing to say is, I think that this is part of the reason that subscription services for games, as we move to that all digital model, I do think subscription services for games will become much more popular
Mm.
because, from a value perspective, they will provide the most value. Whether that be Game Pass or, like I've even mentioned before, at the moment I've got Ubisoft Plus, right? Because I started playing on PC and I didn't really want to buy my entire library of Ubisoft games that I've had over the years on PC again. So I was like, what's the easiest way I can do this? So I was like, oh, I'll pay 15 pounds a month, and over the year, that works out at like 180 quid, which is 200 something US, right? But the way that I look at it, and look, I'm in a fortunate position where we often now get review codes from Ubisoft. You will know that if you've been following our site for a while. We reviewed things like Avatar, Star Wars Outlaws, and we're very grateful for that. But the way that I rationalize Ubisoft Plus being worth it to me is that if I didn't get these games for free for review purposes, I would be buying them. And often that would cost me, like £200 a year anyway. So I might as well just get the membership and get all the games. And I do think that as we move, to digital, where people can no longer get money back on trade-ins and things like that, I think we will get to the point where people understand the value of subscription services much more. And, I'm sure we've got more news here, but it's like even PlayStation Plus. On the top 2 tiers of PlayStation Plus, Plucky Squire is available for you to play right now. Like, if you have PlayStation Extra or PlayStation Premium, you can go and play Plucky Squire right now. And you should, but we'll tell you why later on. Jeff, do we have any more news here before we get to the Plucky Squire?
Yeah, we got a little bit here. Ubisoft denies reports that X-Defiant, speaking of Ubisoft, is dying. Provides updated Year One roadmap. So Ubisoft has released an updated Year One roadmap for its free-to-play shooter X-Defiant, highlighting important changes and new content coming down the road. The blog post also denies reports that X-Defiant is dying, stating that the game is in a healthy state and that Ubisoft has provided additional resources to the team to fix some of the larger issues, like hit registration. The blog post starts by addressing the issues that players have been having with hit registration in X-Defiant, which doesn't work as reliably as some other multiplayer shooters. The simplified explanation given is that currently packets are sent twice between players, but the industry standard is 4 times. In order to achieve this, the X-Defiant needs to reduce the size of their packets so that they can send them more times. No solid release date was given, but the team hopes to make significant progress by the end of Season 2. The blog post also denies reports that X-Defiant is in trouble at Ubisoft, although it doesn't respond directly to some of the claims. The report from Insider Gamer from late August stated that X-Defiant player numbers have dropped significantly since launch, and that if Season 3 doesn't turn things around, the game could be in danger of shutting down. The blog states that no, the game is absolutely not dying, and reiterates the quality of life improvements are high on the priority list. The blog post also includes an updated roadmap for X-Defiant. It reiterates that each season will include 3 new maps, 3 new guns, and a new faction to play, but now it also lists progression changes and quality of life changes. Season 2 includes player collision and footstep audio improvements, in addition to event challenges and improved battle pass progression. So you can read the full article on at GameSpot. Yeah, like I mean, personally, I've stopped playing X-Defiant. I've just got way too much that I'm playing right now. That and when they dropped Rhea Ripley in Black Ops, there, I had to, or Modern Warfare 3, sorry, I had to jump in on there and
Yeah.
rescue mommy from being hell fast.
So what I would say is I'm similar to you. I have stopped playing it, but that's only because I have too many things to play at the moment.
Yeah.
It's not because I don't like the game. Like, if I had more time, I would be playing the game.
Yeah.
I am happy to see them release this roadmap, because to me that at least allows them to show people we do actually have a plan for this game, and we do plan to keep supporting it. Because sometimes I feel like the reason players stop playing these kinds of games is because they think it isn't being supported. And I think that if you hear, oh, a game might be dying, you're not going to try it, right? Whereas if they can come out and say to you, no, like, we are supporting this game and this is our plan over the next year, I think that will entice some people that maybe weren't going to try it because they heard it was dying to now try it. And this is one of the things I spoke about. Like, I really do hope they stick with this game and they build upon it, because okay, yeah, is this going to be a Rainbow Six Siege level of success? I don't think so, because I think it's got more competition to deal with than Rainbow Six Siege had at the time. But I do think that this game could be moderately successful if it's built upon. So I'd like to see them continue to build on it. I think there's some really interesting things they could do with it. So we'll see. Like, we'll keep an eye on it. I do hope to go back to it when I have more time, but I don't know when more time is going to come anytime soon, because there's so
Yeah,
many
pretty
games
much.
coming out soon.
Way too many. Alrighty. Bungie is reportedly considering a $40 price tag for Marathon. Um, That's according to multiple sources talking to the Game Post, who suggested the PvP extraction shooter's launch price could match that of the two other live service games recently published by Sony, and that would be essentially Helldivers 2 and Concord, which no longer exists. Sony said in May that Helldivers 2 had become PlayStation's fastest selling game launch ever, far exceeding expectations at 12 million copies sold in its first 12 weeks. In contrast, Sony pulled Concord from sale and took the game offline within 2 weeks of its official release last month, following
Can I
reports
just
that
interject there, please, Jeff?
yeah,
I don't believe that I do not believe personally that Helldivers 2's success was anything to do with the price point. Like I I know price can make a difference, but I have a feeling that even at a full price 70, that game probably would have been successful. Um
I don't
would it have
ah
sold as many
yeah,
copies?
I don't think it would have
Probably
sold.
not,
No.
but it still would have sold a lot of copies. Um and then, we see Concord, the same price point, and it's an absolute failure. So it's interesting that they're even considering this for a Bungie game. I'm interested to see what they have to say about why that might be.
Yeah, like um there's no official launch window, I guess. Apparently it was being targeted for a 2024 release prior to a delay.
Hmm.
But yeah, it'll be interesting because I mean, they take a look at like Concord, like it basically sold uh, apparently as few as 25,000 copies.
25,000. Yeah, yeah.
You know, I think if Helldivers 2 would have been a $70 game, I think it just would have failed. I don't think it would have sold like even close. Because again, like
I
when you
mean,
take
it's
a look at
certainly
70 and 40, that's a
yeah.
huge gap.
I mean, it certainly wouldn't have sold 12 million, but I don't think it would have been a Concord failure either.
No, I think it
Is
probably would have been 3 to 4
yeah, yeah,
because like it's almost twice the price over.
yeah. That's true. That's true. Good point. Do you not think, though, in the case of Bungie, that they have a bit more cachet with the consumer? Like people know who they are. They know that they've got a history of making good games.
Yeah,
Could
they got a
could
lot
you
of
not
bad
afford to
PR
take?
right now. Like most
Yeah,
of the community hasn't really been happy with Destiny for a while. New
that's
players,
true, actually.
it's impenetrable to get into anymore.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
I mean, you
they
said it was terrible, right?
they
When
sold
you
to
tried.
oh, I know they sold to to Sony for a particular deal, and then Sony went back on that deal and have integrated them into their studios. Like
Yeah.
Bungie's not sitting in a good place right now.
No, it's
So
no.
I don't
That's
know if
true.
it really has the goodwill. Not to mention to a new to a
That's
new thing.
true. I guess what I'm saying is more that when you're a known studio, I think that you can get away with charging a different price than an unknown studio who maybe doesn't have the same level of history backing them up, right? It's the same as like there's been a lot of discussions about GTA 6 being the first kind of $100 game for the standard edition of that game. And I'm not saying that will or won't happen, but I could see it happening because Rockstar is one of those companies that up to a certain point could probably charge whatever they want and people would buy the game anyway.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it's interesting to see, and I am interested in what Bungie does next because at least when I've played their games, and granted, I haven't played Destiny for a few years now, but when I have played their games in the past, I've always enjoyed them, and I do think they have some of the best shooting mechanics around. Like, I think they just know how to make that style of game. So I'm really interested to see what they do next.
Yeah. So our last story, unless anything breaks, is a no-brainer. Square Enix has said that Final Fantasy VII Rebirth and Final Fantasy 16, which are both PlayStation exclusives, and except for Final Fantasy 16, which just released on PC, but at launch, have both underperformed. As part of a newly published results briefing, which was originally held in May, the company said that profits unfortunately did not meet expectations. Despite the release of Foam Stars and Final Fantasy VII Rebirth in Q4, initial sales were not as strong as expected. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth was released around 1 month prior to this investment briefing. All three underperforming games were initially PlayStation 5 console exclusives, and such it could have argued that they could have been released on Xbox Series X too. Square could have generated the extra income from them. In the time since this briefing, 16 has been released on PC. Rebirth remains exclusive to PS5, but the first entry in the Final Fantasy VII Remake trilogy was eventually released on PC, so it's reasonable to expect the sequel to follow. Elsewhere in the briefing, the company says that it will shift to a multi-platform strategy. In the case of HD games, we will create a global environment that allows more consumers or customers to enjoy our major franchises and AAA titles, including from our back catalog. So one of the reasons that I think that Rebirth did not sell as well is because a lot of the people that bought the PC version after they bought the PlayStation version are like, I'll just wait for the PC version. It's coming
Yeah,
to PC.
because they
So they
know
just
it's going to come at some
so
point.
yeah.
Yeah,
So like of course those sales aren't going to arrive, you know?
yeah. And I
And so
think that, this, them officially confirming that both of the last two Final Fantasy games didn't do as well as they had hoped and expected either, kind of makes more sense as to what we've heard recently about the fact that they are now all in on going back to a multi-platform strategy for basically every single one of their games, right?
yeah.
So doesn't surprise me because I think that that's what they need to do. And, with Tokyo Game Show coming up soon, I'll be honest, I'll make a prediction right now. I would not be surprised to see one or more Final Fantasy games announced as coming to Xbox.
I think
With
we'll see Final Fantasy 16 and Final Fantasy 7 remake.
Yeah, I agree with that. In other somewhat positive news related to Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, though, if you are interested in a PlayStation 5 Pro, Digital Foundry have done a video about the PS5 Pro, and they have kind of called out Final Fantasy VII Rebirth currently as being the one game that really does show what a remarkable improvement the Pro can be over the standard console. And apparently, the game, from what they can tell, is putting out a 4K image with 60 FPS compared to the somewhat blurry image of the standard PS5 in performance mode at 60 FPS that isn't necessarily stable. So at least there's one game that's benefiting from a $700 console.
Wow, Jordan, that was worth $700. Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh wait, US. That was worth $1,000, Jordan. Wow. I know where I'm putting my money in November. Like, yeah. I mean, of course, it's going to run better.
But do you know what game I would rather pay $1,000 for, Jeff?
Brute Force 2. I know of it.
Yeah, but what other game that we've played fairly recently?
Like Space Marine?
Yeah, maybe more recently than that.
Oh, you're not going to pay $1,000 for the Plucky Squire.
I mean, I'd rather pay $1,000 for the Plucky Squire than a PS5 Pro.
I don't know about you. You can have that opinion. I'll give it to you.
I mean, I do like the game, and I guess we should probably get to it right now as to why we like the game, right? Do we have any more news here?
I don't think so. Let's see here. No,
Okay.
we just have Final Fantasy 16 is crashing, apparently part of some PS5 update. We've had alleged
Oh,
images
fun.
of the Nintendo Switch, but I'll wait for
Yeah.
confirmation. And Freedom Wars used to be on the Vita. Now it's coming to Switch, PlayStation, and PC.
Vita
But
game lives.
Vita means life.
Nice. Well, anyway, let's talk about the Plucky Squire.
Never heard of it.
because this was a fairly good game based on both of our reviews, right, Jeff?
Yeah, like 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 I gave it an 8.
Eight, eight. Yeah, you gave it an eight,
Um
and I gave it 4 stars out of 5 on the Outer Havens scale. Um, so yeah, we're kind of aligned in where we think the quality of this game is. But I'm interested, Jeff, to hear first of all, for people that don't know what this game is, can you explain what it is? And then secondly, why you think the game is an 8 out of 10 in at least some detail, but leave some to be discovered for people who can head over to the site and read your full review there. But yeah, what is the Plucky Squire, Jeff?
yeah, so the Plucky Squire is basically kind of like, we've seen video games that have like pulled like movie quality assets. They're like living like a living breathing cartoon, like a living breathing movie. Like we've seen that. But the Plucky Squire is like, well, what if you played a book? And so essentially you play as a character of a book, and the characters within the book find out that they are heroes in a book, that their life is like, some type of, page flipping narrative. And essentially the villain discovers this and realizes that he is destined to lose every single time. Well, he finds a little bit of magic, essentially casts the hero out of the book, but at the exact same time, kind of gives the hero everything they need to kind of like return and save the day. So you're jumping in and out of the book, um, and the book is basically belongs to a kid who has like a appreciation for the Plucky Squire. There's drawings and posters and action figures everywhere and all that
And
kind of
he's
stuff,
inspiring him, right?
and he's inspiring him. And so essentially, you'll jump in and out of the book. You'll use the book by like flipping its pages or turning the book on the side to slide blocks around, as you attempt to defeat Humgrump and kind of take back the kingdom and save the day.
And
So
Humgrump is basically Gargamel from the Smurfs.
I mean, kind of. He doesn't have like a snarling cat or anything like that. Um, but yeah, like there's I mean, like even the main characters and stuff like that almost have kind of like Smurf energy in a lot of ways.
Yeah,
Um, but
yeah,
like it is like again, like I gave it an 8 out of 10, which means great, and it is great. Um, it's got a lot of little issues. It's got like some things that I just kind of wish that they did. Like it's got some neat powers, but I just kind of wish that the game doubled down on them and kind of got inventive with a few of them, because like we've seen indie games come out where they have two or three powers, but then they mix them in ways that you're like, oh, of course, that makes sense. You can totally do
yeah,
that.
yeah,
And the Plucky Squire, unfortunately, does not do that. There's maybe two or three instances where it shows promise of that. Um, but I mean, like, yeah, so like the ability of like you have the book, all right, you have the book, and you can basically like tilt it, and then the block will basically like slide down, and then then it'll go there. And then if you're here and you tilt it, sorry, it's mirrored the other way, it'll then, you can move the stuff around, and then eventually you can close the book and then transport things and stuff.
yeah,
I kind of
yeah,
wish that there was like a way where you could like stun an enemy and then tilt the book and then they would slide off a cliff, or like there'll be a block and a bunch of guards come out and then you hop
mhm,
out and you slide the block and hit the guards. Like I just kind of
yeah,
wish that it played around with combining those types of things,
mhm,
because there's a lot of times where this game is extremely by the numbers and
yeah,
extremely basic. There are probably about 20 pages in the book where it's just you running through a hallway with no enemies. So like it is a great game, but it falls short of making the entire experience as good as it possibly could be, because there are some
yeah,
extremely high highs, but there's a lot of lows.
yeah.
And to
And I
me, that's where
think
it
that
loses.
that is one of the criticisms we've seen that I don't fully agree with, and I will explain why in a moment. But one of the criticisms we've seen is this game is overly simplistic. It it doesn't come together well as a game because none of these ideas stick around long enough and all that kind of stuff. And everyone's entitled to their opinion, of course. firstly, the reason I don't agree with that wider opinion of this doesn't come together well as a game is if your barometer for something coming together well as a game is that it has to have mechanics that stay around for a really long time, then why did It Takes Two win Game of the Year? Because every single level in that game has different mechanics that are with you for maybe 15 minutes. Like, it's
Yeah,
not really any
but in a
different.
lot of ways, those mechanics were a lot more memorable than kind of what the Plucky Squire is doing.
Hmm.
Like, combat to me is serviceable. It's not remarkable. It's
Yeah.
not memorable. You'll basically use the throwing the sword out and and the standard slashing all the time. I never once used the spin. I used it once to try it out. I'm like, oh, I can't really get the momentum I need to really go anywhere. So I
I
never used
kind
the
of did the
spin.
same thing. Yeah, I kind of
Yeah.
did the same
So
thing. I
like
was mostly throwing the sword.
yeah, like the memorable parts of that game for me is like, like the laser thing where you're spinning around the bucket and stuff. That
Yeah,
stuff was super fun.
yeah.
I didn't care for the bow because like the close range enemies, I was constantly getting hit by until I started predetermining where they were going to go.
Interesting.
Um,
Okay.
like if you would have had a melee slash with the bow, that would
Hmm.
have solved it. But
Interesting. I
like
So the way that I solved that is I realized you didn't have to power up your shot all the way, and
yeah,
then I would just quickly shoot them with a slightly powered shot.
yeah. The problem is I couldn't move the cursor fast enough to get to the close range one.
Okay, yeah,
So
that makes sense.
like
Yeah.
that was annoying. The curse, like they would be moving like this fast, and my cursor would be like, "Don't worry, buddy, I'm coming." Like,
What I will say though is that hits on one thing I really loved about the game, and that was its use of almost like, and this is, I actually think this is kind of doing it a slight disservice in the way I'm going to describe it, but almost like mini games as part of the boss fights in the game. So like there's one where the game basically turns into Punch Out, right?
yeah,
There's another one where, like you said, you're going around the bucket and you're it's kind of like a a side scrolling
yeah. Like
shooter.
the shooter stuff was fine. Like they have the
Mm.
mini game where it's like puzzle bobble or whatever,
Hmm.
which I hated. I didn't like that at all. I thought the cursor moved like just weird. I thought like slotting the bubbles in was like too slow for how fast they were actually coming down.
Yeah.
I didn't care for that at all. And then like you do
What about the drumming one?
yeah, so you do the one with Thrash and you do the bird, and then you do the exact same one at the end with
Yeah.
a different bird. When
Yeah.
I'm like, you could have done something really, really cool. Like you could have turned him into a tank and fired off bullets or something like that and did something, but it's just the exact same fight.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like that's the thing that's kind of annoying.
They could have changed like mechanically it could have been the same, but they could have changed something about the way it was presented, right?
Yeah, and
It
like the
Yeah.
the final fight in which you're doing stuff, and I'm not gonna talk about
No,
it.
we won't spoil that one.
But I mean, like, wouldn't have that have been great to have it where like both Violet and Thrash, which are shown on the cover jumping out of the book,
Yeah.
would have joined Jot and they all would have been heroes?
Yes. Yeah, that would have been really. And I felt like at one point that's what it felt like they were building up towards,
Yeah.
because those characters become
But they're
more
like,
confident
Jot,
over the
first
course of the
stay
game.
here.
Um
Like,
but I but in the end, I because like I said, I gave it a 4 stars out of 5, and the truth is, I just had a lot of fun playing this game. I think it's a
yes,
beautiful game.
it is a very, very fun game. It
Uh,
is great.
I think it's beautiful both in 2D and 3D. I did have a problem sometimes with the camera in the 3D world because you sometimes couldn't see things very easily that you needed to be able to see, and you didn't quite have enough movement of the camera, in my opinion, for the 3D perspective. But in 2D it was like this kind of hand drawn crayon almost type of art style, with the black outline that you can see on Moonbeard here in our overlay here, and it just I really really liked that art.
Yeah,
Um,
the 2D stuff is great. The 3D stuff for me did not hit at all. I don't think the 3D stuff is enjoyable even remotely. And I've seen people like saying like, "Oh yeah, but you get to do this, this, and this in the 3D world." I'm like, "You just talked about all of the 2D parts that are in the 3D world."
yeah, yeah.
So like the laser fight and stuff like that, those are
The
2D.
the so the only bit in the 3D world that I really enjoyed that you don't do in the that you don't really do in the 2D world is the jetpack thing. Let's
Which is
say that.
2D. Oh yeah, you're talking about that part, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, like that part was fine, but I will say like the jetpack stuff and the 2D stuff was way more
Yeah, I
authentic and
agree.
fun.
I agree with that. Um and there's also a bit where you go to like a prehistoric area and you get a different weapon and you're kind of like having to run away from certain things
All
essentially.
2D.
And that's all in 2D. So it's like 3D 3D is almost used as
It's a
a
transition tool.
yeah, it's basically a transition tool. And I do like what I will say and where I will give credit is when you get to see these 2D assets modeled in 3D, it is actually really cool. That's like a nice, neat little thing. The problem that I had with it, and this is what held me back from scoring the game more highly, is that it feels like they relied on the kind of oh look that's really cool of seeing 2D assets in 3D to be the selling point of the 3D world rather than giving the 3D world some sort of unique gameplay mechanics.
See, I thought the 3D world was going to be the dominant one, and then the
Mm,
2D stuff was like the mini games that they would sprinkle upon it. That's kind of where I was kind of sitting at originally. But
yeah,
like the 2D stuff is when this game is great. I love the look of the book looks like a real book.
yeah.
Like the light hits the black at the right moments. You can see where that it was.
And the silhouetted moments that you get as well in the book are really cool. I really liked those.
Yeah, like there was a couple puzzles that kind of like stumped me in certain ways. And like it's kind of neat where they're like, "Hey, you have to go and find this guy." I'm like, "Well, we didn't see anybody sitting by a tree,"
And
but
you
then
have to turn the pages.
when you go back and then you find
Yeah,
them, I like how GameSpot made it like an entire like where to find this character. I'm like that's a tweet.
yeah, yeah.
Like you like you know
And also,
um
the what I will say is the major bit of praise I can give this game, and yes, maybe it doesn't go far enough as Jeff suggested, but the mechanics which they do use and the way that they combine all these mechanics into puzzle solving at various different points of the game, and there are only a few of these puzzles that use every single one of the mechanics,
there's like
but
three.
just the way that you do have to use these mechanics over time and the way that they combine to me was really well designed. And it's like you start off with these simple word puzzles, right, where the because the thing about Jot is he is the plucky squire but he's also a writer, and so you'll get these like sentences with a word missing or
Yeah.
with the wrong word in, and you have to look around the world to find the right word. And sometimes it'll be in the 2D plane and it might be nearby, but other times you actually have to jump out of the book, potentially get into a different portal somewhere else, or turn the page. And different words can do different things. So, like, I got an achievement for making mushrooms into cheese at one point, and it's like that's not something I was meant to do. It's
See, like
just something I did because I was messing around with it.
that's the stuff that was great about Scribble Knots, where you just kind of like make bullshit out of bullshit.
Yeah.
And like this one does it sparingly, but I mean, going back and finding another page, I think that's done 4 or 5 times at
Yes.
most. Um, but I love that puzzle so much, but it's never used in extremely interesting ways, and it's never used during a boss fight.
Yeah. Which is what surprised me because the puzzle mechanics of this game, in terms of gameplay, are the strongest part, even though they are more simplistic than they perhaps should be.
Yeah,
And
like
it goes
it,
back to what you were saying. It's almost like they didn't go quite far enough with some of this stuff to make it a truly great experience, right?
like if they make a sequel, like they need to make it so that there is a lot of experimentation, because these types of games really thrive when you can experiment with things and
Yeah.
play around with the, the toolkit and
Hmm.
find ways of making things certain work. Like if they would have had it where you could like use the words to defeat the boss, and all of a sudden someone's like, oh wait, wow, they killed a boss with a cheese grater. I just never thought that was possible. Like there's things that you can kind of do, that I kind of wish that, like maybe they kind of go the Scribblenauts route, and instead of finding words, you're basically writing words,
Yes. Yeah.
you know, and like, or maybe like as you are going throughout the game, you're collecting words and you're building like your own dictionary or something like
Yeah.
that, and then you
And
kind
the
of use
other
those.
thing, and the other thing I would say is, um, in a weird way, and I didn't think I would say this prior to playing the game, but you either need to greatly expand on the 3D stuff, as in, let me go around the entire room and do different things and have unique things I can do in 3D, or don't do the 3D stuff at all and focus fully on the 2D stuff.
I think one of the things that kind of fails for me in the 3D aspect of it is, despite Jot being small and all that kind of stuff, you never feel the sense of scale,
I agree.
because it's a fixed perspective. So
Because
like
you're
when you're
only
next,
on the desk, right, as well, which doesn't help.
but even then, when you're walking up next to like a cup or whatever, and the cup is towering and stuff, it doesn't feel towering,
Yeah, true.
you know. So like I think the sense of scale is kind of lost there. But again, like I know I'm sound like I'm bashing it, but I'm bashing all the stuff that didn't score it essentially higher,
Yeah.
because I think the 3D stuff just doesn't work. I think the 2D stuff is where that game just absolutely shines and
Yeah.
is absolutely fantastic.
So
Um,
so obviously we've spoken through the negative things already, but if you were to kind of pinpoint, let's say, three things that made you give this game an 8, what would those three things be?
Well, I mean, I've kind of already talked about the majority of them. Like, there is a good sense of creativity with what it does do. Like some of the stuff is pretty neat. I like the page flipping and stuff. Like even again, if it doesn't go far enough, it still is good. Um, but like yeah, like the laser shooting section was really neat. I liked closing and tilting the book to do all that kind of stuff. The book just looking like a book, like you can see where they used marker and where they just used fill in, so it has that type of thing. Because as someone who used to draw and used to basically fill in small areas in black and then use a big black marker to fill in the rest, when you shine that in a light, you can see how that looks different, and
Yeah.
that's all here. So like that stuff looks great. Like the book looks absolutely fantastic. And honestly, if Devolver Digital does not make a fucking physical book for
Hmm.
this game that is just like those scenes and stuff and
Yeah.
maybe like little
Yeah.
moments and stuff, I will be shocked.
Yeah, I will, because you would sell that. Like, this book looks amazing, and there's even a part, and I won't explain why, but the book changes.
Yeah.
And even that section, I really liked how it looked. Like, it was,
Yeah, and I like how the narrator just kind of went, kind of full tilt into that idea.
yeah.
It's like there's four of them now.
I mean, the
Like
narration in the game is brilliant. That's one
yeah.
thing I didn't mention, but I really like the
The
narration
the
of this game.
pip sections, the first two were okay, and then I just got bored of them.
I find like I found them interesting enough that I did enjoy them. However, and what I would say is, because I think you do that 4 or 5 times from
Yeah,
memory,
I think it's four.
and that final one that you have to do is almost like overly complicated for the just
That
for no
one
reason.
that one was the easiest one. To me, the one before that was the toughest one. Because this other one, basically, as long as you just follow the pattern and kind of basically go, you
Because
get
it's
to
a
the end, no
rhythm-based
problem.
sneaking game, basically, right? That's what
Well,
it
it's
was.
not so much a rhythm-based one. It's basically a movement-based one. So when like you move,
But
it basically
you can only move on the rhythm, though. Did you notice that?
no.
So
I just
so
basically
each so yeah, so each, you know how you had these things that would change where they were looking,
yeah.
and it would be in time with the rhythm of the sound, and
Oh, I wasn't even. Yeah.
you could only move when that, after each beat, basically. And that's why there was a very specific way of tackling each one of these sections, which was interesting.
Oh,
Um,
I just moved to the jump. I wasn't even paying attention to the music. So yeah.
nice, nice. Well, fair, fair. Yeah, I really enjoy the game. I think that, you know, this is a slightly cheaper priced game. I don't know what the price is in your region, Jeff. Perhaps you could check that. Um, but if you have PlayStation Plus Extra or Premium, as I mentioned earlier, it is free for you to play, and I really would recommend that you go and play it, because certainly if you have younger children, I think that this is a game they will love, right? And this,
40 Canadian.
okay, 40 Canadian. That's not too bad. That's on the cheaper side for Canadian, right, Jeff?
Yeah, and it's on PlayStation Plus as well too. So you
Yeah.
can check that out there. But no, like it is a great game. It is absolutely a great game. Yeah, it just to me it just like it could be even more than that had they
Yeah.
just
It
committed
just
to
misses
really
it
selling on those ideas.
it just misses that really, that element that makes it extra special, I guess,
Yeah,
is the way I would describe it. But it certainly is a great game. I had a really fun time playing it. I would highly recommend it. Please go and read both of our reviews that will be linked below.
it
Uh
uh, it is unfortunate that it had to follow Astro though.
yeah, I think that probably hurts it slightly as well, right?
Oh, I would
so
say definitely.
so yeah, that's unfortunate. I'd love to get back to Astro, but I'm busy playing other things that I can't really tell you about at the moment. But Jeff, before we end this episode, do you have anything else you've been playing that you'd like to speak about?
Yeah, I've played a few things. There'll be a review later out today. The embargo drops after about 3 o'clock. So after this episode will go live,
Yes.
and that is Key Locker. So I've been playing Key Locker. It's got an official title. It's cyberpunk turn-based cyberpunk action is the subtitle, but it is basically just called Key Locker. Um, Basically, it's kind of like a RPG, like cyberpunk RPG, where you basically play as a female kind of rocker named Bobo, who has essentially been arrested because she played music, and playing music is illegal on Saturn because the Saturnian satellites, which is this hierarchy of power, essentially. Um, they consume all of the electricity that is made by music, so it's their commodity. So they essentially like have made music illegal, and Bowo doesn't want any part of that. So she's like, music should be free. And so she basically tries to put on music, and she gets arrested. And then you break out of prison thanks to her brother, who's a hacker. And then basically you go on this quest to essentially kill the satellites. And these satellites, they look awesome. They look so cool. Like the art design in this game is very, very cool. The all the hand drawn like artwork and stuff looks fantastic. Where the game kind of struggles for me is some of the like Soundwave City. As soon as you get a Soundwave City, I think this game just is, it just kind of falls apart in some of its design. It's tough to read where you kind of need to go because of the isometric view and how the art works. You don't know what is a platform, what is a building, what is this, because it just looks like it lines up perfectly or where you can jump. So there's a lot of ways where you can't kind of read where you're going. Playing this on the Switch as well too, like trying to determine like what a certain button press is, like you can't even see what the buttons, and you get a good sense of what you're doing. But then there's these hacking mini games that come up where there's like all these little buttons, and you're like, you can't tell the difference between an X and an A or Y and or V, like on those buttons. And like that's on a Switch OLED with the bigger screen. Like I can't even imagine what this game is like on the light. It's got to be just borderline unplayable. And but the bulk of this game has really good combat. And that is where it is, um, excuse me, on a grid and like honeycomb grid, and basically how you attack will determine like what weapon you use determines the pattern of how you attack. So some weapons will attack up front and to the diagonal and then all around, or you can like fire a gun and then any enemy can get hit. But it uses like the Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga kind of thing, where like if you press a button at a certain point, it makes the attack more powerful, or if you press it at a certain point when you're being attacked, it negates the damage. And
Okay.
that's what this does.
Makes me
Um,
think of Yakuza because they do that in the recent Yakuza games as well, where you have to time certain button presses to
yeah,
either block more of the damage or deal more damage when you're attacking.
yeah. Like the thing is, you have to get really familiar with the animations to know when that white flash is going to happen, because if you
Yeah.
don't, you're going to miss it. And when you're attacking new enemies and stuff, you don't really know where the pattern's going to be. So like you'll usually fight for a little while and then restart the battle and then essentially go from there and figure out how to do it. The story is a little bit hard to follow. It is a good story. I like the characters. I like Bobo. I like everything that kind of happens around that. But I kind of wish that there was like some type of like index or lore type of menu where you could like read about certain characters. Like if I want to know about some of the Saturnian satellites and stuff like that, and like in kind of what the story is, I kind of wish that stuff existed. Um, but like no, like I like you get different classes, and then eventually you'll get like a second class that you can kind of mix into your other class and then learn all those parts and pieces and stuff. And you basically attack either their core health or their shield, and their shield is something called EP, and you can build that up. And like so my main attack with my guitar attacks through EP, and then eventually it'll attack health when it depletes the EP. But I have a gun that basically just straight bypasses EP and goes straight for their health. So I've got kind of a good mix. And I've got like a robot essentially who's one of my companions. Her brother is also someone you can have as a companion. And you'll get like secondary companions that kind of join you as a third character, but generally you're a two-person team. The music's really good. However, the music and combat is very different. It doesn't really have that much of a rock vibe. It's more of like this weird kind of like opera, but without the opera kind of like sound. Um, but no, it's not a bad game. It is pretty decent. It is very difficult to know where to go in some cases. So like one of my quest objectives said, um, you need a music box, and you'll find it someplace up high. But what they don't tell you is that you need to go find the little floating dinosaur head that's overlooking an edge by a building, talk to him, put on a concert. That concert will then get you in trouble. And then the guards get away from the door to this building, and you go in the building, and then you go basically up these stairs through this series of whatever, and you find the music box up there.
How did you even find that? Like,
I spent probably 6 hours wandering around that city, couldn't find it, and I'm like, fuck this. And I basically stopped playing for a little while. And then I came back a day later, and then I'm wandering around. I see the dinosaur head. I talked to him. He's like, want to put on a concert? I'm like, fuck, why not? I got nothing else to do. And then that eventually led me into the building.
that's so
And then
funny.
soon as I saw the music box, I put my Switch down on the couch. I'm like, fuck you.
Yeah, I can
Like
imagine.
if it had said, hey, this music box, you can find it somewhere up high, and it showed me the street, like the district,
Yeah,
so I knew it was in that district, then I would just walk around and interact with everything, because like it doesn't it this is the type of game that needs yellow paint,
yeah, yeah.
because like you can touch and interact with everything, but the problem is everything looks like you can interact with it. Like you could have two doors side by side, one works, one doesn't, and it's the same fucking JPEG. So like it's weird. Like some of the readability in this game is just dog shit, and it sucks because this game is gorgeous.
That's a
Like the
shame, yeah.
character art
Because I
so
have
freaking good.
seen, so I've seen a couple of screenshots and things like that, and the game does look great. So it's that's a sad thing to hear about the kind of signage and readability of the world in terms of what you should be doing and where
Yeah,
you should be going.
like you just get stuck for like completely the wrong reasons. Because like even at the beginning of the game, you get a quest where it's like go west. All right, I'm gonna go west. So I went west and I found where I needed to go. Like it 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 gave me like vague instructions, but it funneled me in a way that makes sense.
Yeah,
Um, so yeah, no, like it is, it is a good game. I do, quite enjoy it. Um, I gave it a 7, which is good,
yeah. Well,
because it
that
is
is,
good.
and actually, I want to give people some perspective on this. Um, because we're now on Open Critic, and people have often asked this question about, what do the different Open Critic numbers mean when I look up a game? And you can find that out on the website anyway for yourself. So I'm not kind of breaking any embargoes by saying this, but we do not currently count towards the top critic average, which is the main number that you would see on a game. However, what we do count towards is the critic recommend percentage. And what that essentially means is that each outlet decides what their metric is for a game they would recommend or not recommend. And I think we're okay to say this, right, Jeff? What we've basically decided is that games that we score as a 7 or above are games that we would consider something that we would recommend to other people to play.
Yeah,
Um, so when you see us give a game a 7 or up, that means we recommend it. Doesn't mean that a 6.5 is necessarily terrible either, but that's why we have an entire scale. So 7 out of 10 means good.
yeah,
So, I'm glad that this game is at least good. It does sound like it has some problems, which is a shame. Um, but people should, of course, go and read your full review, which will also be on the site. So once you click on Jeff's Plucky Squire review below, which you should definitely read, um, go and read his other review, which will be out. Well, it will already be out by the time you're seeing this episode because I will time it so that that is the case. Um, so yeah, go and check the website. Jeff, do you have anything else to speak about before we go here?
I'll have more probably the next time we record, but I've also been playing Elsie, which is kind of like a Mega Man style game but it's kind of a roguelike. So
Interesting. Okay.
every single time you die, you start getting more story, and you also get, oddly, more tutorial. So like like it's weird how they have the tutorial as part of like the beginning parts of these moments after you've died,
Yes. Yeah.
instead of just like telling me everything basically in a tutorial.
Hmm.
But one thing that's kind of neat is that like a large majority of the game is voiced by a lot of like game industry people. So like I met Celestia, and Celestia is voiced by Lucy James,
Nice.
from GameSpot and Giant Bomb. Tamora's in there as well, and then a bunch of other characters and stuff. But it's kind of neat seeing all those characters and stuff, and they essentially play like the bosses um, of the game. And no, it's pretty decent. Like there's some things that I don't like. I think the character clings to the walls a little too much. You can turn that off, but they're still clinging to the walls. There's some nice accessibility settings where you can change like the parry window time. I still haven't really figured out the parry window thing that much. I think it's a little clunky, but you can also just turn on invincibility. But the problem is if you don't die, you don't get the story. So it's kind of a weird thing where you kind of almost have to give up your invincibility to then die to then push through and stuff.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but like very few levels, so you will start seeing like their repetitive grind of going through like the same environments over and over and over again. You get to pick two, but basically you pick two and then you pick a third, and the third has a boss at the end.
Okay.
Um, and then yeah, like you get the things where like you don't get really any permanent upgrades. You basically get currency to unlock things that will then show up on your run.
Okay. That makes sense because that's what most of these
Yeah, it's
style
like
of games do, right?
basically it's like Dead Cells, but it plays like Mega Man.
Interesting. Interesting. Does sound
And
interesting at
it's not
least.
so bad so far. I definitely do have a lot more like misses on it than hits in terms of like certain things and stuff.
That's a shame.
Um, but no, it's pretty decent so far.
And I'm sure you'll be writing about that one at some point, right? So,
Yeah, because like there's a character in the game that is like, hey, make sure you tell this guy that I'm here. And I go to the guy in the main hub world, and there's no conversation to do anything. So I think what it is that I have to use the station that's next to him and buy the
mhm,
thing instead of actually
mhm.
talking to him. So I don't know.
We did miss a little bit of news, and it's only a tiny thing, but this is considering it's related to how we first met each other, in the virtual sense, I think is a good thing to say. But Division 2 now has some new content that you can go and play.
Hmm.
So play that, and also Division 3 officially has been confirmed, and Massive are looking for a narrative director for that game. I saw the job advert earlier, so if any game developers are listening to this and feel like applying to that, there's a job available there because I know lots of people have lost their jobs recently, so it is nice to see someone that actually has jobs available.
Well, it's kind of weird. They're like, hey, yeah, we're gonna make Division 3, but we're gonna cancel Division Heartland.
Yeah, that one was a shame because I was looking forward to that. But I'm a big fan of Massive. Obviously, Division Heartland was being made by a different team. Um, because Massive was very busy doing Avatar and
Being made by
Outlaws.
Red Storm.
I think it was being made by Red Storm. Yeah, I think that's correct. Um, And yeah,
Yeah.
I personally think that Ubisoft Massive is Ubisoft's best developer. I think they've kind of got to that point now where they are probably the best studio under Ubisoft, at least in terms of consistency. And so I can't wait to see whatever Division 3 is, but I am certainly considering going back to Division 2 for this additional content because, as you know, Jeff, I love Division 2. So, I just thought we'd throw that little bit of news in there. We are coming to the end of the episode now, but to give people a couple of updates, because I can talk about one thing that I'm going to be reviewing, because the game will be out by the time I do that, and that is the Dead Rising remaster. I will review that at some point in the coming weeks. However, I am playing things and I'm going to be playing things that have to take priority over that one because I'm going to be playing games that are not out yet that need to be reviewed. So therefore, those things obviously take priority. But yeah, you can look forward to a Dead Rising remaster review at some point within the next few weeks from me when I'm able to spend more time with that game. I will have another review coming next week, but I can't tell you what it is. And then I will hopefully have another review on Outer Haven soon as well, but I can't tell you what that is either. So I'm fairly busy at the moment. I put in another review request today for something else. So we're going to be doing coverage. We may start doing, and I think we can sort of say this, right, Jeff? Small site update. We have considered and we are planning to start doing some form of early access reviews
Yep.
for early access games where we won't officially score those. Until we obviously get the full release of the game, but we will have a special scale that gives you some sort of indication of how we feel about the game in its current state
Yeah, it's
at
like
the
whether or not
time
you
that
should
we review it.
jump in essentially or wait. Because like for me,
Yeah.
it's like putting a score on a game that is going to be updated 3 times before you've even read the review. Just doesn't make any
Yes.
sense.
Yeah, and that's why those reviews won't actually go up onto our Open Critic page until we can put a final score onto them. But they
Yeah.
will be available on the website, so make sure you're following our website as much as possible. And I guess I should actually talk about one game that I've played a bit more of, given that we're talking about early access here, and that is Towerborn,
Mm.
which of course is in early access on PC right now and will be coming to Xbox Game Preview at some point in early 2025. Towerborn, to me, from what I've played so far, feels like it's ready to release.
Mm.
Like, it's an outstanding game. It, like, visually is brilliant. The way it works is that you have 4 different classes you can play as, and they all have completely different combat styles. And what happens is you get a world map with like these hexagon things that show up on the world map, and you select each area to then go and do a small mission within that
Mm.
area. And each of these missions take between 5 and 10 minutes, so they are short. And then you'll eventually build up to, as you progress through these hexagons, you can reach different parts of the map, and you will do a kind of boss mission within each region. But those boss missions can be replayed over and over again. And each time you complete a mission, you get rewards at the end, which is like new gear and things like that. You can get you can earn different currency in the game that allows you to upgrade your gear as well. And another part of it, which does remind me of Division a little bit, actually, you get these things called danger licenses. So you can't access certain areas of the map until you pass a combat test, which you go to the Belfry, which is your main kind of hub area for upgrading and getting missions and things. You go to the Belfry, you do a combat test, which is basically a boss fight to unlock your danger license. And they go from danger license level 1 to 4 at the moment.
Mm.
And what those basically do is upgrade your world tier. So they allow you to
Okay.
play any missions you haven't already played in a higher tier, and any of these boss missions which are slightly bigger, you can then replay in a higher tier. And they also allow you to access new areas of the map. So it's a good way of expanding the game with new content while also giving you a reason to replay other content that you've already played. Um, and I like the fact that each of the classes is leveled up independently, and you put your own gear on them. So if you have a piece of gear that you really like that's on one class and then you decide to use a different class, you have to take that piece of gear off of your other class
Mm.
to use it. Um it's very, very good. It's fast paced, easy to jump in and out. You can have up to 4 player co-op. One thing to say is, at the moment in early access, at least when I last played, but it did have an update yesterday. When I last played, matchmaking isn't working properly, but if you party up with a friend, that matchmaking is fine. It's the public matchmaking that
So
isn't working properly.
it's basically realistic Castle Crashers.
Kind of. I would say it definitely takes a lot of inspiration from Castle Crashers, um, but I think it has more to it than that. Is the way I would put it. Um, there's around 40 hours of content in the game at the moment, so I don't know how much there will be by the time the game gets to full release. I know that what they have said is that they're planning to. So, anyone who is playing it now on Steam, one thing to keep in mind is the devs are planning 2 complete wipes of progress by the time the game reaches its full release, just
Yeah.
because they want everyone to start from a level playing field.
Yeah.
However, one thing to mention is that if you do jump into the early access program, whether that be on Steam now or when it comes to game preview on Xbox, there will be, because there are cosmetic items in the game, because you can also transmog any of the armor you wear with these cosmetic items that you get, and you do get some as a founder if you jump into early access now, but also you earn a certain currency in the game called writs through doing, they're kind of like challenges. So it will be like kill a certain amount of this enemy, or it will be do this certain type of attack so many times, right? And doing these field challenges will earn you writs, which you can use to basically unlock different items in what almost appears like a Fortnite Battle Pass style thing, where you see what the items are and then you choose which ones you want to unlock. And as you unlock all of the items within that section, you can then unlock another
Yeah. It's Fortnite.
group of things to basically work your way through. At the moment, there are no microtransactions in the game. But what I would say is, even if they do add microtransactions to the game by full release, everything I'm seeing at the moment is cosmetic only, from emotes to, like I said, different skins essentially. So I'm very, very positive on Towerborn at the moment. I did actually stream a little bit of it with our friend Keith over on the Outer Havens YouTube channel a few days ago. We were testing out the co-op, so you can go and check that out. And we probably will stream more of it because we both really enjoy it. The price, well, here in the UK at least, was $21.99, so that figures out to around 25 US dollars, and I think it's probably like 30 Canadian. If you jump in on Steam, but at that price, even at this point right now, this game is worth your time.
Yeah.
So I can imagine this coming to Xbox quite early next year. And then if I was to guess, by this time next year, it will have its full release, I think.
Nice.
So yeah, definitely check that one out. I highly recommend it. Obviously not going to give it a score right now because that's not what we do here. And as I play more, I will write up something for us as well. It will probably be our first early access review, but as it stands right now, having played about 10 to 12 hours, it's certainly worth your time based on what I've played so far. And that will be updated as I play more. But that's it for this week's show. We will be back next week, of course. Let us know if you have been playing Plucky Squire, of course, on PlayStation Plus, or even if you picked up the game. Let us know what you thought of it in the comments below. Like I said, go and check both of our written reviews as well. Check out the website, check out the other reviews that we have on OpenCritic, and keep in mind that, of course, if you're new to us and our website, Jeff has done hundreds of reviews since 2017, which are all up on Analog Stick Gaming still.
480 at least, or something like that.
Yeah, so there's many reviews that you can go and read, and we have more coming in the future, and we also have a lot of news coming. I'll actually be putting out a couple of news posts later today. So yeah, we have you covered for everything gaming, basically. And on the odd occasion, we decide to talk about movies as well. So, if you like movies, it might be worth sticking around for this podcast at least. So please make sure you like and subscribe, all that good stuff. But for now, it's a goodbye from me.
See you guys.